Why is it that Dasai as a sake maker picked New York to be their plant? Why has Itoen as a tea company done so well here? What is so appealing about Seiko watches and craftsmanship? And what can the new generation of startup venture people learn from that? The American dream, which has led us for the last 50 years, I believe is more alive and well in Japan than in America right now. If you don't take opportunity now, then I don't know if we ever will. I think we're living in a moment of peak Japan.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the fifth session of the NINEJP New York webinar ecosystem webinar series. Over the past four sessions, we have explored New York's innovation ecosystem from several angles. We began with Japan's global innovation strategy and the role of universities. We then discussed the mindset required to be successful in New York. Then practical pathways into the New York City ecosystem. And most recently, how startups can move from entry to growth and scale in the US market. Today, we would like to take one step deeper. Japan already has a very strong business presence in the US. Japanese companies have invested, operated, and created jobs across the US economy for many decades. But when we look specifically at the startups and the venture ecosystem, Japan's presence still seems much smaller than overall economic footprint. So today, we would like to ask, how can Japan move from investment presence to innovation presence? How can Japanese startups, universities, and innovation leaders build credibility, trust, and a meaningful relationship in New York and across the US? To explore these questions, we are honored to welcome Joshua Walker, President and CEO of Japan Society, and author of Japan Beyond the Genkan. We are also joined by Daiki Nakajima from JETRO New York, who has been co-moderating this series and supporting Japanese startups in the US ecosystem. So today's theme is Beyond the Genkan, from investment presence to innovation presence. Without further ado, let's welcome Joshua and Daiki. So Joshua, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I feel like we're here in New York. This is like the sports capital of the world.
Yes.
We've got the World Cup going. I really hope the Blue Samurai can do really well, and I hope they actually end up coming to New York to play in the quarterfinals. It may be France, but we'll see.
Yeah,
the Knicks are obviously doing very well. There's a lot of energy, and I think there's a lot to talk about. I really appreciate, number one, let me just start by saying I appreciate this.
Thank you.
Far too often, we have great things that happen in New York, in the Japanese community, in the US-Japan community, but they're not promoted the same way.
Yeah.
One of the things that makes New York is promotion.
Yeah.
And I know that in Japanese culture, in the DNA, you don't want to promote something.
Right.
But if you don't tell your story, if you as an investor can't make your case, you're never going to get investment. If you can't tell your story, nobody else is going to tell it. So I think what you're doing with this webinar and what you're doing to broadcast it, both of you individually have done great work. So thank you for what you're doing. Thanks for having me.
No, thank you. Thank you. So we will talk about your book later on, but first I would like to ask you about your relationship with Japan Society, a little bit of background about your history. So and you have been the president and CEO of Japan Society since December of 2019, so 6 years have passed. So first of all, why did you become the president, and what kind of experience you have get personally, and what Japan Society has been doing for the Japan community or relationship between the US and Japan?
Yeah, there's a lot there. So let me just take them in order. A lot of people look at a white guy like me and with such good English, and they say, we don't understand. But, as you mentioned, I've written a book in English, Japan Beyond the Genkan, but I also wrote a book in Japanese, Dome no Tenki.
Wow.
And on this, it says Dosanko America, right? And I think, the first thing you need to know about me is that while the outside may be the most American you can see, I'm 6'3", 190 centimeters, blue eyes, brown hair. My heart, in many ways, is beating like a person from Hokkaido, a Dosanko, we call ourselves. And I think my experience with Japan is one that was organic and it just grew. Like my love of Japan was never implanted in me. It just began organically. And when I left Japan when I was 18 years old to come back to the States, I was just very surprised because the experience of Japan and the way Japan is received and the way it's seen, nobody hates Japan in America, but nobody fully appreciates Japan. And so, close to 7 years ago, when I became president of Japan Society, you asked me, why did I become president? Well, Japan Society's mission of connecting American and Japanese people, culture, and society is who I am. And I have done many things in my career. I've worked in government, I've worked at think tanks, I've been in academy, and I've done work with businesses through Eurasia Group. But nothing had brought everything together. And Japan Society is this amazing institution that for the last almost 120 years has brought people together. Most US-Japan institutions began after World War II because we had a big war, there was a big problem. Both sides decided they had to invest to make sure it never happened again. Right. But Japan Society predates World War II. So as Japan was rising as a country during the Meiji period, I think New Yorkers are a different breed of human beings and of Americans. They saw opportunity in Japan. Right. And so they created Japan Society to further relations. It was more like a chamber of commerce back when we were founded in 1907. And it wasn't until after the war that we really added the cultural elements because, in many ways, war and business sometimes are linked, right? The economies and security are there. But arts and culture, teaching Japanese language, the abundance of what Japan has to offer the world, whether it's tea ceremonies or whether it's martial arts, there's so much there. And so Japan Society tries to connect those dots, and it tries to help people in New York who are globally minded by definition, and the Japanese business community that is the biggest in America here in New York, showcase their best. And so we don't do it by putting other people down. We don't say, oh, the Koreans are bad, or the Israelis aren't doing a great job, or the British are bad. We just talk about what we do best. And I think that's both beautiful, but also we need to work harder at that. And so when I look at our pillars of arts and culture, business and policy and education, there's something for all of your viewers, whether you're a startup or whether you're a university student or a researcher. We need all of you to get engaged, because I think the world that we're going into, which is increasingly geopolitically fraught, and there's a lot of division in our world. And it doesn't matter whether you're talking about politics or whether you're talking about sports. We need something that unifies us. And I think that is where Japan Society works very hard to bring the anime fans, to the ramen lovers, to the sushi people, to the architects, to the Yayoi Kusamas, to the George Nakajima furniture that we're sitting around to come together. So that's why when I was offered the opportunity, I couldn't say no. I was the youngest president ever. I succeeded the first Japanese president who was one of the most senior. He had been an ambassador. He had been the head of Mitsubishi. And then you have a no-name kid like me come in. I was 39 years old when I became president. And it was hard. It was very hard. And especially because only a couple of months later, New York City became the epicenter of the global pandemic. And for over 2 years, we were closed not because the New York Health Department, they closed us for 6 months, but because in Japan, it was closed off to the world for that period. There was really that Sakoku Jidai kind of period there. So it was a lot of work, but I think ultimately the work we've done at Japan Society has set us up for the future and for success, which is what I think we're going to talk about today.
No, absolutely. Thank you. And for Daiki, like JETRO's perspective, we do have not many, but at least several Japanese-oriented institutions such as Nippon Club and JCCI, JA, so on and so forth. But Joshua mentioned, Japan Society has a different roles. From JETRO's perspective, how has Japan Society been helping with your work or relationship or your startup involvement?
Yeah, well, I think Japan Society is different verticals. You have a history here. I mean, JETRO has been here for about 50 plus years as well. So at the same time, I think you brought in the culture. We bring in content. We were an import-export of all those products, food products, anime and all that stuff. So I think that mixture has been pretty good throughout the years of, having the Japan Society in New York and being one of the bigger ones and the most well-known ones. And then JETRO's regional headquarters in the New York area as well. So I think that bond was always there. And then I think and I was here, previous to the previous president, Sakurai-san, when he was here, I was also at JETRO too. But when Joshua came in, it was a completely different sort of challenge. It was a different persona, and so it was very interesting. But at the same time, I think throughout the years and, it was my pleasure to see how you completely changed Japan Society in a way. It was just such a great time. And for me, as somebody who's now integrated into this whole vertical of startups and ecosystems and investments, and not just bringing Japanese large investments, not the corporations that Japan Society work with, but the younger generation, I think there's a new sort of opportunity to work with Japan Society, not just to bring the younger entrepreneurships, but also, to bring that mix of the culture as well. And I think it's super important. And I think, we're onto something at this point. And, unfortunately, in a sense, unfortunately, both, but, there will be a change. But at the same time, I think we're very much excited that it was timely that we see this shift now. So hopefully, this carries on. And that's how I see it.
Yeah, and I think I really appreciate that. I think both of you know this, that New York is probably one of the oldest societies, but also one of the oldest Japanese communities in America, because this is where most Japanese companies begin their journey, right? And I think that New York has a certain brand awareness. Like every Japanese person wants to come to New York. Many Japanese influencers, from Naomi Watanabe to others, Kusama and Yoko Ono, have started and begun here, not just here in New York, but here at Japan Society, right? And I think, Japanese, when they want to go to the world, in some ways, New York is their gateway. Now, interestingly, what's been happening in America is that New York's centrality has begun to diversify. And so a lot of the work you guys are talking about, a lot of that ecosystem comes out of Silicon Valley. We have our own Silicon Alley that you've talked about. And I think one of the challenges we have in the US-Japan space is everybody individually does great work. JETRO does an amazing work to help people get market entry even into Japan, but also into America. But oftentimes you're not connecting the dots to the cultural, artistic people that could get the word out. And so whether it's Shohei Ohtani when he comes to play the Yankees and the Mets, which brings our entire community together, and we support both Ohtani and our home team, I think that's what we're heading into. And I think there's a generational shift that's happening in US-Japan relations. And I got lucky because I think I was on the front end of this. And in some small way, I think I've been trying to help with that because I think in the US-Japan space, and I'll speak what I know best, which is the policy world, there have been people that have been working on US-Japan for a very long time. And they still, in many ways, are living in the world of the Cold War or the post-World War II international order. We're sitting here at Japan Society across the street from the United Nations. The United Nations is no longer relevant for the conflicts that are going on. Nothing can be done about Ukraine or Iran because of the way it plays out. But there are roles, whether it's Climate Week that takes place around that same time, or there's private sector where New York as the largest hub in America and also the center of finance, but also culture, when you put those two together. Because I think in a world in which increasingly hard power, military power, economic power is privileged, soft power is not getting the attention it deserves. And Japan's superpower is its soft power. The American dream, which has led us for the last 50 years, I believe is more alive and well in Japan than in America right now. And I would love to see the Japanese dream take place. Japan helped us understand, particularly during COVID, how to escape things, whether it's Final Fantasy in the video game world or whether it's the anime world that allows us to become part of something bigger than ourselves. So I think Japan has a lot to offer the world. And instead of the Cold War mentality where like Japan is a little brother and America's a big brother, it's time for us to be equals. And I really think that when you combine American innovation, the New York promotional aspect, and Japanese craftsmanship and Japanese determination and resiliency, you have something amazing, which is why I believe in the work we do here. And I believe no matter where I go, from Japan Society to Washington or wherever, I will always be part of this community. It's part of who I am.
That's a nice segue to the your book, obviously. So like you mentioned about the gateway. Your book. We have coincidentally we have it here, but so Genkan is a great metaphor, obviously, and it represents for entrance as well as the exit. So like your book is about inviting non-Japanese to better understand Japan. But also Genkan represents for Japanese to get out to the world as well.
Yes. And I love that you know that because I think that to Americans, they've never heard of Genkan. They're like, what is Genkan? And it's a very foreign word, right? But Japanese words are very cool right now. How many of our friends are talking about ikigai, kaizen, all this stuff? And so my publisher said, no, you can't use that word. It will detract. People will take away. I said, no, I know my community. And I think if I educate every American that has ever been to Japan has experienced one version of Japan. And that is not the takeaway. Just like if you go to someone's house
Yeah.
and you're delivering a package, you go to the Genkan. You never make it past the Genkan, right? But I think every Japanese person, there's a big difference in American and Japanese culture. In America, you invite everyone to your house.
Right.
And the moment you walk in, you're in their house.
Right.
There is no transition. You don't take off your shoes, put on slippers. You're not directed to any room, because in Japan, you slide open the door to invite them to the sitting room. You invite them to the family room, to the tatami room, etc. And depending on your relationship, it's calibrated.
Right.
So relationships take a long time in Japan. And sometimes, particularly New Yorkers, don't have time for that. They get very frustrated. They want a quick fix. They want a transaction. So, the Japan Beyond the Genkan book is really to help Americans understand that it's worth it.
Right.
Here is one life, one experience. But I think so often in US-Japan relations, we only talk about the president and the prime minister.
Yeah.
There are very few stories that really allow Americans to get inside of Japanese, except for people like Haruki Murakami and the content of anime, etc. But it doesn't allow you to experience it. So I tried to use my own story, growing up in Japan, having a connection to Japan for the last 40 years.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is exactly as you said, Hide-san, the Japan Beyond the Genkan is the American kind of opportunity to understand that just going to Japan one time doesn't mean you know everything. You really have to learn the culture, the language, the history, everything that makes it. So I try to explain it in a very simple, easily understandable way. It's not an academic book. It's not footnoted. I don't try to claim that. The Japanese version, which is not the same actually, right? Domei no Tenki, Alliance at a Crossroads.
Sounds very complicated.
This is much more like a guidebook for Japanese to understand how to deal with Americans. Japanese don't need to learn about their own culture. But they do need to know what's appealing about their own culture. Why is it that Dasai, as a sake maker, picked New York to be their plant? Why has Itoen, as a tea company, done so well here? What is so appealing about Seiko watches and craftsmanship? And what can the new generation of startup venture people learn from that? And, I think for a long time, many Japanese tried to hide their Japaneseness. They, in some ways, were proud of their heritage, but they thought that will never sell in America because Americans are very simple. Everything has to have a Western name to it.
Right.
Actually, these days, if I have a choice of a Japanese brand or any other brand, particularly Chinese or European, we're going to go with Japan. Japan's got the highest favorability rating, and it's the largest investor in America. So many of these stories are known by us, but it's not known generally. And I think the reason you write a book is to promote an idea, right? And you have to be so passionate about it because so few people read books anymore, except for your readers and you guys, of course. But I think Japanese read more books than Americans do. So if you can't make your idea in a simple thing, even if you only pick up the book and only read the cover and the back, you understand the concept of what a Genkan is. And if you've ever been to Japan and you've experienced it, then I've got you at hello.
Great title. But interestingly, Daiki, like you were born here, raised here, even though you look perfectly Japanese in a sense, like vice versa.
Yeah, exactly.
So, like, what's your impression? How should Japan promote more, as Joshua mentioned? What are we missing? And also, is Genkan make Japanese kind of like a hard to get out because of the you need to take on the shoes and then just open the door and there are a lot of steps to get out from Genkan. So how do you think?
No, I think growing up here, I mean, I walked in the house with my shoes on and at times, and it was normal and absolutely normal to me to do that as well. But at the same time, I grew up in a Japanese family, so we also took off our shoes too at the same time. It's interesting, and I think, and Josh was right on all aspects of that as well. And funny how I'm on the other side of it. And they always say, it's a joke at the same time, but it's such a great relationship to have because we see it from an interesting perspective. And I think for me, at where I stand today, for the startups and the younger entrepreneurs who are looking to be successful, who wants to be the unicorns of the US market, who wants to be a SpaceX, with $1 trillion valuation. There's that Genkan is, like you said, it is a barrier, just like anything else. But back when, 40 years ago, 30 years ago, when sushi was a challenge to every American out there, it is no longer a challenge to many Americans out there. Everybody loves sushi, right? It was eating a raw fish, or chopsticks, or I think, matcha. Right. What's going on with that right now? So I think at the same time, it will come when that Genkan is, I think, well respected in the sense that, wow, it does work. It is something that's needed. And just like I say to a lot of the entrepreneurships, and this, I think we can debate all about this as well, but the whole concept of Indio in Japanese, right? That needs to be thrown away for startups and entrepreneurs. And if they want to be successful in the US, there's no such thing as Indio in the US when it comes to these young business people who are looking to be successful. So, and that's a very cultural thing that the Japan side is going to have a tough time throwing away or getting sort of like out of their mind for now as a young person. So I think I think time will tell. And I think that's the answer to it. And I think, and Genkan is a great, I think it's something that even as a whole, just the Genkan in a house, we'll start seeing that in houses and interior designs, I think, in the future as we move into it.
And I love that because in New York City, they may not have the Genkan where you step up, but there are many houses where you take your shoes off. Yeah. And Genkans are actually pretty common throughout Asia. It's not just a Japanese concept, right? Sure. And in New York City, where you have so many people living, it makes physical sense. If you track your mud all around the place, every day you have to clean the house, right? Whereas if you take your shoes off and you actually transition, I mean, I think about this even in terms of being a father and being a professional. Like when you get home, it's actually good to take a beat and to change your clothes. So you can transition from president of Japan Society to dad, right? And I think in life, we need more of those opportunities. And so Genkans to me are more than just lobbies, they're thresholds. And when you cross that threshold, you're making a conscious choice. And I love what you just said, Daiki. I think this concept of both Enryo and also Sontaku, right? Sontaku means you put yourself lower than somebody else out of respect. Right. And that works in a culture like Japan where there's a lot of unwritten rules. Everybody knows that you need to humble yourself so that they will respect you. Right. If you humble yourself in this city in particular, we'll take full advantage of you. And if you aren't promoting yourself and if you have too much Enryo, whether it's in politics or whether it's in business, you will be taken advantage of. And one of the things I love about this concept of Enryo is when it comes to what's really hot right now, when I take Haruki Murakami, right, his books that have just taken over the world, when I think about, Luffy, when I think about Dragon Ball Z, when I think about Pokemon, none of those things have Enryo, right? They are, when they're promoting it, they have some level of Enryo and they have some level of Sontaku. But if you meet Haruki Murakami, he's one of the most confident men I've ever met. He is very convinced and he knows that what he's writing is true to him. Whether you like it or not, that's a different story. And I think that ability, and I think I see that same sense in Shohei Ohtani, right? I was at the World Baseball Classic earlier this year and it didn't go the way we wanted. Japan didn't win and America didn't win. But man, the joy of the Venezuela team. And I remember the last World Baseball Classic where it was like an anime or a Hollywood movie where Shohei Ohtani strikes out his own teammate. And I think the entire collective nation and all of us in US Japan, we're just so proud and excited to see that someone from Japan didn't have Enryo. And he said, for this game only, all these big names that you play against, everyone that you respect, throw it out. We're equals today. And I think sports is a great metaphor to allow us to do that. And I think if our startup community can take that, say, I'm not asking you to be, sorry, we have to edit that out. But in New York, I think if you are not meant to be a bad person, because I think in Japan, if you act the same way as you act in New York, that's not going to go well for you. But if you understand, and also the other piece is, if the American side that loves Japan can help educate Americans about how business is done and what the role of a Genkan is, what the role of kaiseki meal is, because many of New Yorkers are like, I sit here for 2 hours and I have 15 courses come through. Am I supposed to eat this? It's too pretty to eat, right? I'm like, look, this is not where business gets done. This is where they are testing you the entire time. And if you can't kuki o yomu, if you can't read the room, then you don't get to go to the nomikai, the drinking festival, because that's where the business gets done. And in America, it's the opposite. If you walk in and you don't make a good first impression and you don't immediately seal the deal with the excitement and the energy you have, and it takes you 3 hours to get warmed up, like forget about it. Don't come to New York. This is not your place. Go somewhere else. And so I think that's what you're helping the Japanese community. And I'm trying to help the American community say, look, there is value in Japanese products and investment in Japan, but you've got to explain it. We can't compete in terms of cost and quantity. That's what China is going to do better than us. But there's a lot that Japan has to offer. And I think it's Japan's moment, honestly.
Oh, yeah. It's apples to oranges, but we're trying to make it work.
And as long as the product is good, like the Americans love it, right? Like Otani is a perfect example. Like who cares whether he's Japanese or not? Like he's a superstar, so that's all we care. Right?
But I think the thing is, Otani's a great example. When he hits a home run, think about Dominican Republic or the USA team, right? When they hit a home run, look at me, I'm the biggest guy out there. What does the Japanese team do? little whisk. And Otani is doing it not to show off, but to show his teammates he respects them.
Right.
And the way in which Otani himself will go out and greet players that are not at his stature, and he bows and he has respect. I think the greatness of Otani in some ways is connected to his Japaneseness. The fact that he's a two-way player, I'm biased, I'm from Hokkaido. He was a Nippon fighter before anybody else. And so the fact that he honed his craft in something that no one thought was possible. And even Babe Ruth, the hero of this town, was not able to do what this guy has done.
Right.
And so I think if that is possible coming out of Japanese culture, what else is possible? What else other unicorns are out there? What other great leaders are out there right now watching this that just need a little bit of encouragement? And I hope that's what we can do by providing that for them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I'm running this Japanese school, right? So then we hear from the US school that they because of Otani, and then he cleaned up the dugout, and then Japanese fans are clean up the stadium in the World Cup, so on and so forth. So that some of the US school took the tradition to clean up their room, which kind of natural, as a parent.
Yes.
We tell kids, hey, if you mess up, you should clean it up.
Absolutely.
So it's not, for Otani's case, it's not only about the skill, baseball skill, but also the culture he brought into the US. So I think that's like a startup can do, and the universities can do, so on and so forth.
And I think that's a really good point. Whatever happens at the World Cup, how far Japan goes, every time I think the country that comes out looking the best is always Japan. And it's because of that. Because the fans and the team, even when they were beating Germany at the last World Cup, they cleaned up their locker room. They left a little note of gratitude. They put a little origami crane there. I mean, there is just something so beautiful, because you're 100% right. As a parent, if you give me a very crass choice, do you want your kids to act like a New Yorker or a Japanese? There are good points of both sides. I want my kids to be confident. I want them to do what makes them happy. I want them to be individual. But I also want them to live in a society that has harmony. And I want them to respect their fellow human beings, no matter who they're cheering for. And at the end of the day, sometimes New York fans who pay so much money to go to things assume, I'm paying this much money, why should I have to pick that up? Whereas I think Japanese are taught, if you did it, you clean it up. And I do think that the world we live in needs to be a world that we pass on better to our next generation. And I think if you don't think about something bigger as a parent or something else, you lose that. And I think if you're only focusing on the transaction for today and can I get the biggest payout from this, you're missing, I think, what Japanese culture teaches us and allows us to think in broader terms.
Yes. So also, like you mentioned, the key for Japanese startup or Japanese university academia who want to come to the US is how to adjust their angel and also good social people person. So both sides have advantage as well, but adjustment wherever you go,
you have to educate.
Yeah. So then so this webinar series is perfect for that. So we told why you need to come to New York, and we spoke about the mindset, and we also how to get into entry strategy in the US, and also last webinar we talked about how to scale up. But underneath of all of that is trust, and then that's what you have been doing well. That the Japan society has been doing well. So in that sense, what are some of your advices to startup universities or academians who would like to come to the US? They may have a great product, but they don't have trust yet because they have not come here yet. So how should they collaborate with the existing trust such as Japan society and JETRO? How to utilize the trust the predecessors have created in New York?
I mean, I think, look, there's this concept in Japanese of ancestors, and you always stand on the shoulder of giants, right? Like, I think every single day when I walk into this office, this was John D. Rockefeller III's house, right? It's now the Japan House. And the Rockefeller family, where you look around New York, you see a lot of things named after them. And, unlike Japan, where there's a lot of respect put on history, America's always looking to the future. We're celebrating our 250th. We want to move on to the next 250th. It's a bit embarrassing sometimes because Mitsukoshi, a Japanese department store, is older than my country, right? And this guy's been making sweets longer than you've been around as a state. And I think Japanese take that for granted. So I think the first thing is, it's natural that after a war like World War II, that Japan would respect America and that you would have a deep respect for many things that come from America. And Hollywood did a great job, Coca-Cola, jeans, everything. But many of those same things, whether it's baseball, that's an American sport that Japan is playing better, whether it's jeans that started in America but now are produced better in Japan, there's no reason to have enryo or sontaku because you can be self-confident. So the first message is be confident in who you are. And also, because you are Japanese and because Japan is so hot right now, don't run away from that. Be who you are. And I think that for many Japanese, it's hard to take that to heart because Japanese culture tries to make you feel like you're the same as everybody else. Like you're not better than anyone, right? That is not what we tell startups in America. You're like, if you don't believe you're the best in the world, you're never going to make it. The other piece is you have a lot of friends. You have Japan Society, you have JETRO, you have Japanese schools. And so, you know, as you said, 40 years ago, when I would come back to America, people would make fun of me for coming from Japan. And they would basically talk about bad stereotypes from the war and everything else. Now, no matter where I go, it's not just because I'm the president of Japan Society. I have a deep, abiding affection. And so wherever I am, I can find a connection to whatever. And, you know, I don't always have to say Japan is the best, but I can say this is the way we do things in Japan. And I think that Japanese, you know, startup culture, students, others who are watching this, you have to first take the first step. No one is going to do that for you. It's expensive right now to travel to New York, but I don't think you'll regret it. And I think if you can find friends, whether at Japan Society, whether at JETRO, we want to support you. That's the whole reason I wrote a book. That's the whole reason I'm president is I want to support you directly. And so, you know, there's a whole world out there that is ready for you and it's your time. If you don't take opportunity now, then I don't know if we ever will. I think we're living in a moment of peak Japan that I call it. And I think for the next 5 years, it's going to be hot. But after that, Japan's demographics, Japan's economy, if you don't step up, then who will?
Yep, you have to take the opportunity. And then Daiki, you are the front runner of helping the Japanese startups. So where do you see the biggest like trust building challenges for Japanese startup and the university academia, so on and so forth, who want to come to the New York, US?
Yeah, I think just like Joshua said, you know, relationship is the biggest factor of this. If you know somebody, take advantage of that and utilize it. I think that's where the biggest challenge is. When the Japanese people come here, they don't know anybody. We didn't, as a whole, the Japanese businesses, the Japanese culture, we didn't really build a community in a specific area. I'm going to take away California just because California is a little bit different. But in New York, you know, we've always had generations of Japanese people here. The community never really came together. Let's just say like a Korean community or the Chinese community. It was never, you know, a whole. It was different places, different people, doing different things. So I think that over the years caused where if somebody comes, they just didn't know where to go. Do we go here? Do we go there? Do we go to the Nippon Club? Do we go to, you know, how do we interact with the bigger corporations? But I think that's where we lacked. But I think that's where we also need to build at the same time. And I think at JETRO, we are trying to build this gathering where if younger generation entrepreneurs who have the product, who have this dream can come, we have that support to do it. And I think it took a while, but I think it's happening now. And then, you know, thanks to, you know, the current prime minister and the previous prime minister, you know, other prime minister at most, just for pushing startup ecosystem. But I think that's what's happening now. And we are seeing the government putting money into more of these programs. And, you know, we're busy more than ever to create that ecosystem nonetheless. So I think that's where it matters the most. And again, the relationship really matters. And that's for me too. When I go to Japan, you know, if I wasn't at JETRO, it would have been a harder time for me to get to people. But fortunately, you know, I'm here and I welcome all these Japanese, you know, startups and companies and people that come here. That in turn, when I go to Japan, really helps as well. And I'm pretty sure in Josh's seat, I mean, you've seen more prominent people than I have, but you know, I think it matters a lot. It matters a lot.
And I think it's a really important point. It's so easy, particularly for Japanese, to think that these institutions like Japan Society, like JETRO, are what make things happen. The dirty secret is it takes people, it takes leaders, and it takes individuals. You know, to pay it forward, you know, we recently did an event with JETRO and we had all of these startup people come. And it was one of the most amazing programs we've had, not just because we had a full house. We have a lot of full houses at Transit, but the energy, because it felt like for the first time, people were being seen. And we're here not just to help them on the business side. If they're successful, great. I'd love for them to give money to Japan side. My job as a nonprofit leader. But I'm more excited to see the next generation be energized. And I think this dichotomy in Japan, where there's such respect for the ancestors and legacy, but also need to think differently for the future. And, just to say the obvious point, many people look at the Japanese American community in the New York area and it's not mobilized. There is no Japantown like there is Chinatown, right? And even Korea, Little Italy, Koreatown. And I think there's a history there. There's a legacy there, right? Japanese Americans were interned. We committed mass atrocities against our own citizens in America. Japanese Americans are no exception. And so I think even among the Japanese American community, there is a feeling that, well, I don't know if I want to work too closely with the Japanese government. And that history is something we have to overcome together. And it's a lot easier for me as a white guy who's not Japanese American, but is a Dosanko American, to call it out when I see it. Because I go to so many Asian American things and I see the Chinese community and the Korean community so aggressively involved. And then I don't see the Japanese American community. And then I don't see the Japanese community because the Japanese community says, we don't want to get involved in politics. We don't want to make our hands dirty. The Japanese American community says, we want to make sure that no one questions our loyalty. So you have a double whammy. So acknowledge the problem, which is history, and look to the future. How can we support the US-Japan community that is inclusive of maybe not ethnic Japanese Americans? Because one of the things I talk a lot about in the book is many Americans get this wrong about Japan. They think that Japan is a racist country. They think that Japanese look down on Koreans or Southeast Asians. It's not about looking down on any ethnic group. It's about being an insider versus an outsider.
Like Genkan, exactly.
And I think that in Japan, it's about either being a gaijin or a nihonjin. So with someone like me, when I was young, I was always gaijin, right? Now when I go back to Japan, because of my prominent friends, they all say, no, he's with us. He's a Dosanko. You don't know who this guy is? He wrote the book on this. And so as a result, I'm being welcomed back in. And I think because Japan has realized that its future is global, it can't be only an island nation anymore. I think Japan has an opportunity to right some of the wrongs of the past. And I think with the support, America's a very, Americans will follow wherever there's quality. And when I look at the entertainment sector and how well K-pop has done, Demon Slayer, all this stuff, they're doing an amazing job. And one thing is they have literally no end. They are throwing everything they have at it. And Japan is curating and saying, well, what movie should we put forward for this award? What music should we put forward this award? That's not the way things work. That's not the way Hollywood works. Shogun was not produced by a Japanese company. Many Japanese people have never seen Shogun. And they're like, why would anybody watch this? Even the Japanese language is like Shakespeare Japanese. Like I had a hard time. I had to read the Jimaku to understand what was being said.
Even Dosanko.
And even Sanada-san, Sanada-san got his start here at Japan Society in New York as an actor. He really played that straight. And then when they decided to launch this, we hosted the first party for them here in New York. And many of my members said, why are you doing this? This will never be a success. They talked down about their own opportunity.
That's もったいない.
本当にもったいないね. So I want the next generation. It's okay to have different preferences. It's okay to not love Shogun. It's okay not to love anime. It's okay not to love ramen, although I'm from Sapporo, so Sapporo miso ramen is the best. I don't want to hear anything else. So I just
except for Osaka, where I'm from.
And of course, tonkotsu from Fukuoka. It's a big rivalry we have. We have the same thing about pizza in New York. So he's going to tell you New Jersey's better. Connecticut's going to tell you. It's a big thing.
Yes.
Bagels, right?
So we have a lot of friends, and of course, our friendship between the many institutions need to improve, but it has been improving a lot. At the same time, another big friend should be a corporation.
Yes.
As you mentioned at the opening remarks, Japan has the largest FDI, foreign direct investment in the US, and the Japanese corporations are everywhere. So what kind of advices do you give to both the big corporations and the startup from a corporation standpoint? They are willing to support the startups, but their ties are not as strong as we hope. So they are missing the dots in a sense. And the startups they should more rely on or should seek help from the corporations, Korean corporations, Chinese corporations, or the Israel corporations. They are helping a lot for startups and there are a lot of networking events, so on and so forth. How can we improve that aspect? Maybe Joshua.
Why don't you start? This is your belly wicket. JETRO is in the front edge of this. So let's start off.
Well, I think what so aside from the startup side, the other aspect of JETRO that I work on is essentially that the grassroots of economic relationship. So helping Japanese corporations make their investments easier in the U.S. by creating these relationships with the states, the federal, and I've been doing that for the past like 6-7 years now. And so I've learned quite a lot inside of how, not just from a politics perspective, but how the Department of Commerce works, how the governments work, or the governors, how they work. And interestingly enough, it's interesting that this came up too, because I was thinking about the other day, is Japanese corporations are so used to switching expats, right? Switching people, right? Every 3 years, right? They've been doing this for throughout the entire lifetime of the company, probably. But then when they come to the US, they don't take the US like that. They don't. The US changes a lot, and frequently, people change, go from one place to another place, right? But then, shouldn't the Japanese corporation know how that works? How relationships work when people shift? Governors change, presidents change. When you're making an investment in a Toyota, let's say making an investment in Houston or Texas, 5 years from now, the whole administration is different. They might not know how Japan works. So why can't Japan sort of when large corporations make sure to maintain these relationships? Because right now I'm that. Whenever a company comes, they want to make an investment. They want to make an investment in New Jersey. I put them in touch with the economic development team, understand the whole taxes. But sometimes these companies have been in this country for many, many years. You could have essentially built that relationship already. But because people switch in Japan and people switch in the US, it's a difficult thing. But I think we've been doing it for so long that, granted, we have board directors now that are, American, and corporate governance and all this stuff right now that's happening. And you have headquarters that are, with a leading local CEO, for instance. I think that's happening finally, but could have been done many, many years ago. We've always had that example. But that's my thought on making sure these investments continue on. And sure, we have these big investment opportunities right now. You have your $550 billion investment strategy that's happening right now, but we don't know when it might change or not. It is happening. There are investments coming in. Japan continues to be the number one investor, but other countries are catching up.
When I love what you're saying, and if I can take a step back, because I agree with everything he said, and I'll build on it. First, you have to start with information. I don't think many Japanese fully appreciate how much profit is coming from America. So if you start with these large, one of the challenges is Japanese companies, let's take the trading houses, for example. It's so hard to explain what they actually do. Like to a Japanese saying a shosha, okay, well, it's everything, right? You can make everything from like missiles to ships to cargo to like plastic to anime. Mitsubishi does all that, right? Mitsui does all that, Sumitomo. But I think because there's this kind of history there's not as clear of an understanding of like, what does that mean? And because you have expats changing all the time, unless you have an individual leader who knows how America operates, and I think increasingly, to your point, it's becoming more political. The prime minister and the governor of Japan is saying, hey, we got to invest more. We need 550 billion. Give us all the projects you have in America, and let's put them all in this bucket, right? We recently honored Nippon Steel at Japan Society. And, steel is probably the most complicated commodity in the world, because without steel, you can't create the engines of both industry and also military, right? And so, Nippon Steel is buying US Steel. US Steel is literally the most iconic company with Superman, the Pittsburgh Steelers, in the most politically fraught election we've ever seen, in the most important political state in Pennsylvania. So from a Japanese rational business point of view, it all makes sense. But from an American political point of view, we're looking at them being like, are you crazy? Like, what are you doing? And you had to sue the president of the United States. You had to overturn a decision. That is the least Japanese thing in the world. And yet they did it. So I think Japanese companies are learning, but in my book in both languages, I use examples because I think you have to give examples.
Right.
And increasingly, some of these big and large companies are having a harder time explaining themselves. It's much easier to talk about sake and cars and whiskey and watches as it is to these conglomerates. And we're in New York, so a lot of the work that happens here is in the finance industry. And whether it's fintech or whether it's banking sector, there's a lot of changes happening. And I think Japanese companies need to be on the front lines of that. So as you mentioned, some places like Israel are just known for being startup hubs.
Right.
And Japan is known for being the scale hub. You can get from 0 to 1 really quickly in Israel, but to get from 1 to 100, you're going to need the scale of Japan. And I think that combination, which is what you're working on, what JETRO is doing, is long overdue. And to me, there's no better place than New York, because New York allows you to have a very strong Japanese base and a hub. The history of these big companies, big banks are all here. But at the same time, there's an energy that is its own. And so, it's expensive to do business here. Japanese minds sometimes think in very cost-effective terms and say they'd rather go to Texas, they'd rather go to Indiana. Happens to be a lot of red states. I think they got to find a way to calibrate that. And you need better advice, particularly on the subnational level, because I watch Japanese companies exactly like you shoot own goal after own goal against themselves. And then when they have a problem, they come to someone like me or to you and say, hey, and if you would just come to us in the front end, because they say, I don't need a membership in Japan Society. It's not worth it. I don't care about culture. Well, maybe you don't care about culture, but your employees do.
Exactly. Yeah.
I will say that the modern day shosha is the Googles, the Teslas.
Oh.
Yes.
They're the modern day shoshas.
Yes.
Because they are now overtaking the whole tech ecosystem, which is everything today. And Google owns practically everything in every part of every industry. Tesla, same thing, the space for anything mobile. Right. So I think the smart US corporations understand that sure, the Japanese corporation shosha works. It does work. And the smart corporation, I think, understands that in today's modern day, what we need, what we live by, they are owning it today, right? So I think essentially that's where the relationship should work too. At the same time, is utilizing this old school way, but it would still works till this day. But then understanding that modern day is different. There are different ways to do things. AI, how to utilize it, and I think everyone's doing that, right? All the Mitsubishi, the SMBCs, all doing that, but it's still very Japan centric. But they need to be a little bit more global centric in a sense to understand. Younger people think differently, and the younger entrepreneurs, the younger executives think differently. So it's an important thing. It's an important perspective.
Can I say one more thing on that? I think it's really important. Mitsubishi is one of Japan Society's largest sponsors, and UFJ as well. But I think there's a deeper respect in Japan. So, we don't have GE anymore, right? And all the companies you just mentioned are relatively new. There is no 100-year-old Google or Tesla or anything else, whereas Mitsubishi and SMBC and these guys have been around. So if I'm a Japanese startup, that's a huge opportunity because even if it's not everything, that investment, that confidence that comes with the stamp of approval from one of these, shoshas is actually really valuable. And that's what it takes. And the question is, you may have been successful in Japan with that model. And, what it takes to get investment from those companies in Japan is equally strenuous as what it takes to get top VCs here. But you don't translate the two. So there's these two ecosystems that are forming. And the question is, how do we bring them together? Because the next generation of Googles and Microsoft and Apples, who are all investing heavily in Japan, by the way, and are eager to do more business. I mean, most of the investment banking firms here, the big hedge funds, they're all going into Japan in a really aggressive way. The last couple of years has been a boon for Japan. But the question is it good enough that BlackRock, Blackstone, Apollo, KKR, they're just, Carlyle are going into Japan? Is it enough? They've all bought, Buffett bought a bunch of shosha stock. That shows you the value. But what's next? And what is the next generation of leader going to do? And I think that's what I'm excited for. And I want to be helpful in whatever way, because, I've been doing this for a while. I'm not going to be able to create my own company. That's not what I'm good at. But I'm also really good at telling stories. I'm also really good at helping Americans understand and appreciate Japan. And I think right now, the bottom line for me is everybody is aware of Japan, but not everyone appreciates Japan. And until we can translate that and people will actually pay money for the appreciation of the craftsmanship and the quality of Japanese companies and products, we are not where we need to be yet.
That's what we have learned from the previous session as well, right? Like as a startup, you should not compete on the price, but instead like compete against services and like a new value you can create on that. And like especially in New York, people pay premium for the speed or the quality to solve the issues. So then like next to good segue to the next one, like we have a lot of friends here, so like we try to create a community, and Joshua, you at the Japan Society helping the create a community and helping startups coming from Japan, and Daiki, obviously you are doing a lot, but like a startup and the universities or academia, they themselves need to make effort sustaining the activity in New York. So from that aspect, like what kind of like advice do you give to them? Like, of course, like cost of living is very expensive, but like it's worth it. So like
I mean, look, you need to think about New York as a global stage. You can't look at New York just like any other market. There's something different here. People don't come to New York to put their brand on Fifth Avenue and try to sell enough product to sell it, right? To make money off of it. Most stores and brands lose money on Fifth Avenue. But because you're on Fifth Avenue, it attracts attention. And there are some Japanese companies, Uniqlo is the one I'm thinking about, Muji is the other one I'm thinking about. They are killing it here in New York. They are doing exceptionally well. And I think that the Japanese mindset needs to dream bigger. I think the Japanese mind very much is kind of in these silos. And I think that, Japanese will come. You asked about universities. So I was just with the University of Tokyo President Fuji Sensei, who came in for the annual dinner. And Todai has a campus here, right? But it's a very small campus. Keio has a campus very close to my house. It's great, but it's not enough. And when I look at what other universities are doing, even like Turkish universities and like Italian universities, and I'm not saying that in a negative sense, but the GDP and the size and scale of what University of Tokyo has to offer versus Boğaziçi or Middle East Technical University, I think we have to dream bigger. And in a world in which I think Japan is well placed to mediate between the United States that's becoming more transactional and China that's becoming more of a authoritarian problem. I think Japan offers something. Europeans like Japan. The global South likes Japan. So even as America becomes less and less hospitable and less interesting from a global perspective, it doesn't want to be the policeman anymore. I think Japan has an opportunity. And so if I'm thinking about a growth market, it's not that you're going to get more students in Japan. You might have a lot of foreign people coming. The price of getting an education at University of Tokyo is so cheap compared to going to Columbia, like where I'm teaching, right? And so I think that you can compete on cost because of the yen-dollar ratio against New York. But I think you need to think about New York differently. This needs to be your showcase place where you come in for the premium top. And if you can make it in New York, as the song always says, you'll make it everywhere. But that doesn't mean only. You don't need to have all of your work staff in New York. You can have, like many Japanese companies are doing, their workers in cheaper areas of America. And if it's about the energy boom, clearly Texas. If it's about tax incentives, you've got Tennessee and Florida, many other places. But you're always going to have to come to New York because this is where the investors are. This is where the media is. And this is where you got to tell your story. And I think we're missing an opportunity as the U.S.-Japan community because we have this amazing history here since the 1950s. And I go back and I think about, whether it's Morita-san of Sony or whether it was other leaders, we just don't have those anymore. And I'm sad because it used to be that New York was the clear focus. If it was California, I'd be okay with that. But it's just that we don't have a globally minded brand of Japanese leaders. And of course, whether it's Yanai-san of Uniqlo, whether it's Mikitani-san of Rakuten, we have these great leaders. Certainly Son-san, who's doing a lot. He's probably the most successful Japanese entrepreneur, but he's not as interested in U.S.-Japan. And so how do we create that opportunity? And how do you take these companies that are doing great work and combine them and find partners for them? And that's where I'm a little bit komarimashita. And like, how do we do this?
Yeah, but like even Uniqlo, like their first venture in New York was not successful.
That's right.
But now they themselves make failures and just be successful. Even like Uemura-san Daikin, the same thing, right?
Yes.
Like his first trial was not that successful, but now he's building the 30 billion corporation. Not the entrepreneurship itself, but like his move itself to the US was venture.
Well, I think that's the point you're
Yeah.
talking about with Enyo, right? Like you should celebrate failure.
Right.
Now, in Japanese culture, if you fail, you have to
Yeah.
commit seppuku, and you have to disappear, right? But I think that in some ways that is the old order.
Right.
Most American investors are not even considering you
Yeah.
if you can't show them a failure.
Yeah.
And I will say this about myself as well. People look at my career, particularly on LinkedIn, like, oh man, Joshua, Dr. Walker, you've been very successful. I've had some spectacular failures in my life. And I often don't start with my failures, but if you ask me, I'll tell you right away.
Mhm.
And I think that comes with a resiliency and a grit. And I think about Japan, and what makes it amazing is not that everything is perfect. I think sometimes Japanese try for perfection
Right.
too much, but actually what makes Japan is its resiliency.
Yeah.
When you are an island nation formed from volcanoes and living in a world of earthquakes and dangerous neighbors, you develop a thick skin. You know how to survive. And whether it's people from Osaka who are the best business people in the world because you're always pushing, like I actually think there's a lot more in common, honestly, between Osaka and Tokyo. Because I think that people in Tokyo and Kyoto sometimes have more of the DC mindset of like, oh, we're the best. We have the greatest history. The emperor's here, right? But like Osaka's like, okay, you got the emperor, but we've got good food and we got good hustle, and we're gonna break this down by just working harder than anybody else.
Yeah, I always say to everyone, I feel more comfortable being in New York than being in Tokyo.
Yes,
As Osaka people, right? I think three things are in common between Osaka and New York. People don't follow the signals, but people don't listen to others, and everybody likes making money, right? So
That's so
the
true.
same thing. On top of that, most important talent being in Osaka is being funny. Whether people are funny or not, right? So to be funny, you got to make many mistakes. Often the time, people don't laugh. Right?
Yeah, you have no shame.
100%. That's not.
I do have some shame. That's different story.
You still are Japanese. It's built into your DNA. No, but I think there's so many great aspects, and I think also, again, I think sometimes we look at Japan as a monolith. Everybody looks the same. Everybody's Japanese, right? That's not true, actually. Somebody from Osaka who's very close to Kyoto, actually, geographically, are very different because their mindset, right? And also somebody from Hokkaido is totally different from somebody from Okinawa. And to an American, you all look the same, right? But Japan has abundance in all areas. And actually, one of the things that's very hayatte or very popular right now is regionalization. So people don't just ask me as president of Japan side, what's your food recommendation, right? It used to be, what's the best sushi restaurant? That's controversial, right? Where's the Japanese food? Now people are asking me specifically, where's the best Sapporo ramen? Where is the best Fukuoka ramen? Where is the best Yokohama ramen? Where is the best, tonkatsu? Where is the best? They become so sophisticated, right? And I think that's not true everywhere in America. You can get good ramen when you go to Texas, but you can't get good Sapporo miso ramen, right? Like that only we have in New York. And I think that level of depth, because every person in Japan travels throughout Japan. And when you go to Osaka, when you go to Kyoto, there's certain omiyage you must get, right? And in America, we have bagels in New York, we've got, pizza, we got a lot of things, but we don't have that same level of regional specialty. We have it in like big regional groupings, the South, the Northeast, like Texas, like Midwest, like the West. But I think that is something that's going to become even more popular because New Yorkers don't want to just go to Japan. Everybody's been to Tokyo and Kyoto. What's outside? Everyone wants to go to Hokkaido to go skiing now. I can't afford to go anymore. Like Niseko's become like Aspen, where I'm like, I can't pay 5,000 yen for what should be one coin, 500 yen, not 5,000 yen for ramen, right? So I just think that there's something there. And I think that being proud of where you're from, whether it's Osaka or New Jersey, allows you to be a better version of a friend of Japan and a friend of America. And I think that's what I want to celebrate. And I want all of your viewers to take that pride and not take it to arrogance. It doesn't have to go extreme levels of New York. We can moderate Japanese confidence and just be able to do what we do best and take the best of Osaka, the best of New Jersey, and make it into the best of US Japan.
And get used to the failing experiences.
Well, and look at failures not as something that is devastating, but a learning experience.
Exactly.
Life is full of learning opportunities and how you interpret. I mean, this is what I love about Japanese culture. I learned from being in Japan, largely from Zen meditation and from the Zen mindset. I can't control what happens out here all the time, but I can control what happens here. And when you have a failure and experience, you can either frame that as an opportunity to learn something. It's almost better to know what you're not going to do. Many of my early experiences, I thought I wanted to be something. And then it turned out I was really bad at that something. And it at least told me what I was not going to do. Because when you're young, there's so many opportunities in the world. Like my son believes he's going to be an NBA player.
Yeah.
And with all due respect, and I love my son dearly, and if he can somehow use, mechanical abilities, he is never going to be able to compete in the NBA because physically he doesn't have the right genes, right? But at this stage, anything is possible.
Yep.
And as a father, I want to support him.
Yep.
But over time, I look at what he's naturally gifted at, and we're going to do that. And I want our entrepreneurial community to do that too, and to hone in on what is your superpower. If you can figure out that superpower, and I actually think Japanese have a unique superpower. It's not just soft culture. Japan is one of the few countries that still listens in the world. My dad used to tell me, God gave us 2 ears and only one mouth. And most places I go, everybody's yelling, shouting, and screaming. Japan is the one country not. And we're saying we want Japan to be more out there, but I don't want to change Japanese. I want Japanese to be confident, so when it's your turn, you don't get missed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great,
Absolutely.
thank you. Any final thoughts, comments?
No, that was a lot. It's always fun to have these conversations. We go on forever.
Yeah.
We could be here for the next year talking about it. But you're gonna have many more conversations. So I hope your listeners will get a chance to check out my books at some point in time, whether in Japanese, Dome no Tenki.
It's available on Amazon too.
But I wrote this book not to sell books. I'd be very happy if you bought it and shared it with everyone in your class, because I think the message that I'm trying to deliver is exactly what your message is, which is let's promote what's out there. Let's find a community together and let's build together. So.
We, New York, are ready to welcome you. So just come over and let's have some fun time together. It's either failure, successful, both. That's great. Thank you for joining.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you, as always the case. All right, thank you. See you next time. Thank you.
Tomorrow's silhouette shines on the glass and wire. Even if they laugh, I'm still